Since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with carnivals. The lights, the rides, the music, it all felt like magic. Growing up in a small Illinois town where nothing much ever happened, the arrival of the annual carnival was the highlight of my year. While most kids were into sports or video games, I spent my time counting down to the next big event, planning every game I'd play and every snack I'd eat. This love for carnivals stayed with me well into adulthood, but there's one memory I can't shake, no matter how many years go by. It's a story I rarely share because, to this day, I'm not sure if anyone would believe me, or if I even believe it myself. I was 11 years old the spring it happened. The carnival was set to arrive in a week, and I was already buzzing with excitement. After school, I often visited the town library. It was a quiet place, perfect for killing time until my dad got off work to pick me up. One particular afternoon, I was wandering through the dim, dusty archives section when an oversized book caught my attention. It was a record of the town's history, filled with old photos and notes from decades past. As I flipped through the brittle pages, something slipped out and floated to the ground. It was a carnival ticket dated 20 years earlier. The colors were faded but still recognizable, vibrant red and gold with the carnival's signature logo. For a moment I thought it was a prank or some kind of replica, but the paper felt aged and authentic. I pocketed it, thinking it was a cool piece of history. When the carnival arrived the following week, I decided to bring the ticket with me. I didn't plan to use it. I just thought it would be funny to show the gatekeeper and see their reaction. That evening, the carnival was just as dazzling as I remembered. Strings of colored lights crisscrossed the fairgrounds, and the smell of popcorn and funnel cakes filled the air. At the entrance, I handed the ticket to the man at the booth. He looked at it, then at me. His expression changed instantly. His jovial smile turned into something cold and wary. "Where did you get this?" he asked sharply. I stammered something about finding it in a library book. Without another word, he handed it back, unpunched, and waved me inside. His hand trembled as he returned it, though, and his eyes lingered on me as I walked away. The carnival was as fun as ever, at first. I played ring toss, rode the Ferris wheel, and devoured a plate of curly fries. But the uneasy feeling from the gatekeeper's reaction stuck with me. Every so often, I'd catch a worker glancing at me, their faces serious or almost afraid. Finally, I approached an older man running the dart booth. He had a kind face and a calm demeanor, so I thought maybe he could explain the strange behavior. When I showed him the ticket, his reaction was even more unsettling. He turned pale, his hand shaking as he pushed it back toward me. "You shouldn't have this," he said in a low voice. I asked him what he meant, and after glancing around to make sure no one was listening, he leaned in and told me a story. About 20 years ago, during one of the carnival's stops in town, a boy around my age went missing. He'd been seen running around with his friends earlier in the evening, but by night's end, he had vanished. The search went on for weeks, but there was no sign of him. No clues, no witnesses, nothing. The only thing they found was a single carnival ticket, identical to the one I was holding. It was discovered tucked into a hollow tree near the fairgrounds. After his disappearance, rumors started circulating about strange accidents and unexplained events at the carnival. Workers reported hearing voices in empty tents, rides malfunctioned without explanation, and shadows moved where no light could cast them. "They say the boy's spirit is trapped," the man whispered, "or worse, that something else took him and is still here, waiting for another. That ticket." He paused, visibly uneasy. "That ticket shouldn't exist. You need to get rid of it." His words left me rattled, but I wasn't ready to believe such a wild story. I stuffed the ticket back into my pocket, mumbling a quick thank you before walking away. I tried to enjoy the rest of the evening, but the fun had been soured. By the time I got home, I had resolved to keep the ticket, partly out of defiance, partly because I didn't truly believe it could cause any harm. But things began to change after that night. It started with little things. My bike's chain snapped on the way to school, nearly causing me to crash into traffic. My mom burned dinner twice in 1 week, which she never did. My dad lost his wedding ring, and no amount of searching turned it up. Then the bigger things started. My best friend stopped talking to me after accusing me of stealing a rare trading card. My dog Charlie, who'd been healthy as ever, fell seriously ill out of nowhere. And one night, I woke to find my bedroom window wide open, even though I was sure I'd locked it. By now, I couldn't deny something was wrong. The unease from the carnival was back, stronger than ever. I thought about the old man's warning, his insistence that I leave the ticket behind, but I didn't. One evening, after another fight with my parents, I decided to destroy the ticket. I took it to the creek behind my house and tore it into pieces, letting the current carry them away. For a brief moment, I felt relief, like I'd broken free from a terrible weight. In the days that followed, life seemed to settle back into place. Whether the ticket had been cursed or it was all just a string of bad luck, I'll never know. What I do know is this: some things are better left untouched, no matter how intriguing they might seem. I've always loved fairs and carnivals. Something about the lights, the music, and the sugary scent of funnel cake always drew me in. They reminded me of simpler times, running wild with friends as a kid, winning cheap stuffed animals, and daring each other to go on the scariest rides. But after this year, I'm done. Our town's annual fair isn't much to write home about. It's small, predictable, and mostly geared toward kids and teenagers. But it's a tradition, and when my best friend Mia begged me to go with her for old time's sake, I couldn't say no. We went on a Friday evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The fair was set up in its usual spot, a big, dusty field near the edge of town. The colorful lights glowed against the darkening sky, and the rickety rides were already spinning and creaking. "It's kind of sad now, isn't it?" Mia said as we wandered past the game booths. She wasn't wrong. The fair had lost its charm over the years. The rides looked more run down, and the workers weren't as friendly as I remembered. Still, the nostalgia was enough to keep us there. The night started off fine. We rode the Ferris wheel, screamed on the spinning gravitron, and even managed to win a small stuffed turtle at the ring toss. It wasn't until we passed the tent advertising the amazing Arlen that things took a strange turn. The tent was tucked off to the side, away from the main attractions. A hand-painted sign outside read, "See wonders beyond imagination, the amazing Arlen's one-night-only performance." "That's new," Mia said, tugging on my arm. "We have to check it out." I hesitated. The tent looked older than the rest of the fair, with frayed edges and faded colors. The area around it was oddly quiet too. No crowd, no music, just the faint rustle of the wind. "Come on," Mia insisted. "It's probably just some cheesy magic show. It'll be fun." Reluctantly, I followed her inside. The interior was dimly lit, with rows of folding chairs facing a small stage. Only a handful of people were there, scattered across the seats. We sat near the back, the smell of dust and something metallic filling the air. After a few minutes, a man stepped onto the stage. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a black suit with a red cravat. His hair was slicked back and his face was pale, almost unnaturally so. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice low and smooth. "Welcome to the world of the extraordinary, the impossible, the unbelievable. I am the amazing Arlen, and tonight I will show you things you've never dared to dream." The lights dimmed further, and the show began. At first, it was what you'd expect. Sleight of hand tricks, disappearing scarves, a levitating cane. The audience clapped politely, though the atmosphere felt strained. Something about Arlen's movements was unsettling. They were too fluid, almost inhuman. Then he called for a volunteer. "Don't even think about it," I whispered to Mia, but she was already raising her hand. Arlen's gaze locked onto her, and a slow smile spread across his face. "You, my dear, step right up." Mia bounded onto the stage, her excitement outweighing my unease. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice dripping with charm. "Mia," she replied, grinning. "Lovely. Now, Mia, are you ready to become part of the impossible?" She nodded enthusiastically. Arlen led her to a large wooden box at the center of the stage. It looked like a standard magician's prop, worn with peeling paint and brass hinges. He opened the door, revealing the empty interior, then gestured for her to step inside. I felt a pang of anxiety. Something about the box seemed wrong. "It's just a trick," I told myself as Mia climbed in. Arlen closed the door and turned to the audience. "Prepare yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, for Mia's grand transformation." He tapped the box 3 times with a silver wand, then flung the door open. It was empty. The audience clapped, but my stomach twisted. I leaned forward, scanning the stage for any sign of Mia. Thank you," Arlen said, bowing deeply. "And now for her return." He closed the box again, tapped it 3 more times, and opened the door. Nothing. The clapping stopped. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Arlen frowned, a flicker of something, annoyance, crossing his face. "It seems our dear Mia is being a little shy," he said with a chuckle. "Not to worry, ladies and gentlemen. She'll find her way back soon enough." He gestured toward the exit. "Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the fair." The audience shuffled out, confused but entertained enough to move on. I stayed frozen in my seat, staring at the empty box. "Mia?" I called, my voice trembling. Arlen turned to me, his smile returning. "Don't worry, she's perfectly safe. Just part of the act." "Where is she?" I demanded, standing up. "Ah, the curious friend. I assure you she'll be back shortly." But something in his tone made my blood run cold. I waited outside the tent, pacing back and forth as the fair began to wind down. The crowd thinned, the lights dimmed, and still there was no sign of Mia. I tried asking the workers, but none of them seemed to know who Arlen was. "There's no magic show here," one of them said, looking at me like I was crazy. Desperation set in. I returned to the tent, only to find it gone. The space where it had stood was empty, the ground undisturbed. That's when I noticed something glinting in the dirt. I picked it up, a small silver ring. Mia's ring. I reported her disappearance to the police, but they found nothing. No witnesses, no evidence, nothing. The fair packed up and left the next morning, taking any chance of answers with it. Weeks turned into months, and Mia was never found. But sometimes, late at night, I hear her voice, faint and distant, like it's coming from another world. "Help me," she whispers. And I can't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some dark corner of the world, the amazing Arlen is still performing, and Mia is still part of his act. It was supposed to be a night of harmless fun. After all, who doesn't love a carnival? The flashing lights, the scent of fried food in the air, the chatter of children, and the distant melody of a calliope. It was nostalgia wrapped in a kaleidoscope of colors. I never imagined that it would become a nightmare I'd never wake from. My name is Sam. Just your average 20-something, working a dull job in a dull town. When the posters for Carnival Nocturne started popping up all over, promising a night of thrills and wonders like you've never seen, I thought, why not? A bit of excitement wouldn't hurt. It was a chilly autumn evening when I arrived. The entrance was grand, marked by an arched sign strung with flickering bulbs. A man in a red tailcoat and a top hat stood at the gate, his pale face illuminated by the glow of a lantern. His smile was unnerving, too wide, too rehearsed. But I chalked it up to his role. Carnivals were all about theatrics, weren't they? "Welcome to Carnival Nocturne," he bellowed as I handed over my ticket. His hand was ice cold when it brushed mine, but he didn't seem to notice. "Enjoy the show, Sam." I paused. "How do you know my name?" He simply smiled wider, his teeth unnaturally white under the lantern light. Before I could press further, he gestured me inside. The carnival grounds were sprawling. It felt much larger inside than it looked from the outside. Booths lined the paths, each manned by peculiar figures with exaggerated features and elaborate costumes. One woman with a mask-like face juggled knives with unnerving precision, while a man with hollow eyes balanced on a rope high above, his movements impossibly fluid. Despite the excitement around me, a strange tension lingered in the air. The laughter of the crowd sounded wrong. It was almost too perfect, like a track playing on a loop, and the workers, every single one of them, moved with a mechanical grace that sent shivers down my spine. I shook it off. "You're just imagining things," I muttered under my breath. My first stop was the Hall of Mirrors. The outside was adorned with spiraling patterns that made me dizzy if I stared too long. The attendant, a tall, gaunt man with a face painted like a skull, waved me inside without a word. The interior was a labyrinth of distorted reflections. Some mirrors stretched me out like taffy, while others compressed me into squat, ridiculous shapes. I laughed at first, but the further I went, the stranger the reflections became. In one mirror, my face was completely blank, a smooth oval of skin where my features should have been. In another, I saw myself smiling, even though my real face was stone cold. I quickened my pace, trying to find the exit. That's when I saw it. A figure, taller than any person I'd ever seen, stood at the far end of the corridor. Its limbs were grotesquely elongated, its fingers dragging against the floor. It wore a tattered cloak that seemed to absorb the light. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure raised a hand and pointed at me. I bolted. My footsteps echoed as I ran, the walls of the maze closing in on me. No matter how fast I moved, I could feel its presence, hear the faint scrape of its fingers against the glass. Finally, I burst out of the maze, gasping for air. I turned back, expecting to see the figure emerging after me, but there was nothing. Just the eerie, grinning attendant watching me with hollow eyes. "Did you enjoy the mirrors?" he asked, his voice like dry leaves rustling. I didn't answer. The night only got stranger. Every attraction seemed designed to unnerve. The Ferris wheel, towering over the carnival, gave me a brief reprieve until I noticed the other passengers. They didn't move, didn't breathe. Their eyes were wide open, fixed on some distant point, as if frozen in time. The food vendors offered treats that looked normal but tasted wrong. The cotton candy melted on my tongue like ash, and the popcorn left a metallic tang in my mouth. Then there was the carousel. The horses weren't the whimsical, painted figures you'd expect. These looked lifelike, too lifelike. Their glassy eyes seemed to follow me as I walked by, and I swore I saw one twitch. By midnight, the crowd had thinned, or at least it seemed to. The laughter and chatter had faded, replaced by an oppressive silence. I decided it was time to leave, but the exit was gone. I retraced my steps, growing more frantic with each turn. The paths twisted and looped back on themselves, leading me deeper into the carnival. The workers ignored my pleas for help, their smiles plastered on their faces like masks. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and the lights began to flicker. I ran. I stumbled into a large tent at the center of the grounds, hoping to find shelter. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of incense and something metallic. The tent was empty, save for a single wooden stage. The man from the entrance stood there, his top hat now missing. His pale face was even more unnerving up close, his eyes sunken and bloodshot. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, though there was no audience. "Welcome to the final act." I tried to back away, but the tent flaps had vanished. "You've been chosen, Sam," he continued, his grin stretching impossibly wide. "Chosen to join the carnival. Forever." "No!" I shouted. "I don't want this." He tilted his head, almost sympathetically. "But the carnival wants you." The ground beneath me split open, revealing a chasm filled with writhing shadows. Tendrils of darkness reached for me, pulling me down as I screamed. I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. The carnival was gone. No sign of the posters, no mention of it anywhere. But every night since, I've dreamed of it. The lights, the laughter, the figure in the Hall of Mirrors. And every morning, I wake with the scent of incense in my nose and a new, unexplainable scar on my body. The carnival isn't done with me, and I don't think I can escape.